Hey everybody. So think I'm live here. Yeah, I've got a bit of a delay um because I'm broadcasting, I guess, right? So it's not like it's like a 10-second delay on the video, which is kind of weird to see. Let me just see if I can tweak that. That's this video. Yeah, so the flowering of consciousness, and what does that mean? I just want to put up the video here so I can see what it's weird seeing myself delayed. I can't focus like seeing that. I kind of like hold on a second, let me just go to the my channel and there we go. Okay. Uh there we go. Boom. That's better. At least now I can see what's happening. Yeah, so the oh, that's delayed too. That doesn't help. Okay. Whatever then. So I called this video the flowering of consciousness. So as you know, like a lot of you guys, I've been doing these transmissions. I've been doing these transmissions. Rasa, which is the Ramaji Advaita Shaktipat attunement, I think it stands for. So Ramaji's this American guru guy. He's got if you look up Ramaji on YouTube, you'll find him. He's kind of I haven't spoken to him. I mean, he's got a personality which is kind of, mm, it's kind of, but he does seem like his technique does seem authoritative and real, based on my experiences since I started doing these transmissions. Yeah. So what I would say is like the Ramaji, and what it is he's got a bunch of disciples, like teachers, like certified teachers who use his techniques to awaken people. Now it's interesting because you think like I've been talking for a long time about Kundalini awakening, right? I mean that's like my big thing, and but it's pretty clear looking through the literature that there's like different ways of understanding awakening. So the one aspect of it is like the Kundalini awakening aspect of it, right? Which is it's a very energetic. Also, it's very energetic. It's also very visual for some people. Or some people have like more physical symptoms. Mine's been I've had physical stuff, but very a lot of visuals, like a lot of visuals and spiritual experiences and this kind of stuff, right? Um, but if you read a lot of the Buddhist literature, like if you read the Mastering the Core Teachings of the Budding of the pudding of the Buddha, right? I think I've done well mastering the core teachings of the pudding, but the Buddha not so much. Um, if you look at that book and many other Buddhist books, what they tend to talk about is they tend to talk about the what they call the rising and passing away. And they when you say rising and passing away, it doesn't sound like a big deal, and it's not. But that's what Kundalini awakening is for them. It's the rising and passing away. And then you move on to it, and then you stay focused on what real awakening is supposedly. So yeah, so it's difficult to think about how does that work. Then by contrast, I've been working with this Rasa teacher. He's not teaching Rasa. He's a transmission provider called Gareth, and he was saying the other day that also he was saying the same thing. He's like, well, he's Welsh, and he's like, well, when the he's like after you have full awakening, he's like you kind of lose like a lot of the Kundalini experiences. I'm like, that's interesting. No, I've heard, but interesting he says that. And then at the same time, he's giving an Advaita Shaktipat transmission, which by its very nature is a Kundalini transmission, right? So I guess it doesn't pass away completely, right? There's still I think maybe what happens it gets put into perspective. Things get put into perspective more, and that's kind of what happened to me in the last couple of weeks. Is my way of understanding things is changing. And I haven't really been looking for this. This is emerging from the I guess from the transmissions, of which I've done a bunch of them now, you know. But so my experience with this is that, you know, a lot of you guys have seen a lot of my videos, and like my experience has obviously been very visual, heavy meditational aspects. Sorry, I've got a cat making noise behind me. I'm thinking it's ripping the trash apart, maybe. I don't know. Um, anyway, I've been working heavily in meditation and this energy vibe, and it's like, how do you uh as well, what is the difference? Because something's changed. And so I think what's changed is this, like, and this is just in the last couple of weeks, and it's been really, really cool. It's been really cool. It's surprising, um, and a bit scary. No, it hasn't really been scary, but there's like an element of like, oh wow, this is real kind of a thing to it, right? So I'd say like previously, and this isn't completely true. I'm just trying to like paint broad strokes here. But I'd say previously the Kundalini manifestation has been more on the sort of energy level, obviously, and also manifesting like in the what might be recognized traditionally as the imagination. Um, yeah, you can't even say imagination because it's bigger than that, but that's just the only way of understanding it, right? And what seems to be happening right now is the manifest the manif you can't even talk about it. It's weird. You just can't even describe it. But it's like it's almost like the manifestation now is more in the physical world, right? And it's not really that, but that's the only way to explain it. So the manifestation previously seemed like it was more the sort of infinite exploration of imaginative constructs. And whereas now what it feels like the unraveling, it feels like the unraveling of all conscious concepts in the physical world. And it's like funny because it just feels normal. It just feels normal, but then you look at something and then it's like you just have this you just get this consciousness of exactly what it is, and you can it's almost like you can see it unravel, but it's not a visual unravel. It's a sort of unraveling of understanding. And this cat is going to drive me nuts, man. Um, it's like Olympics behind me with this cat jumping around. Um, so it's like the unraveling of consciousness. And see, it's interesting because like there's this part of Kundalini. Um, well, a good example is when I did the Shaktipat with Chris Mitchell. Like on the first day, we got the first transmission, and I went downtown to do some shopping or something. I was walking through the mall, and I talked about this in a video about it, but like I was looking into a store called La Hogasa to buy a coffee. I was just passing it, and I thought, oh, I should get a cup of coffee. And at the very moment I thought that, I got this message saying that you are the jewel in the crown or something like that. I was like, what? And I looked down and I saw this big diamond. It was like a lotus and a diamond, like in my belly, like in the Svadhisthana area. And there was this diamond and this lotus around me. And then, oh yeah, and then I get this blissful, ecstatic energy. It was just so unbelievable, and it was so overwhelming that I obviously didn't buy coffee. I went out to there's a park nearby there, and I went out to the park, and I just sat there for like an hour as this energy just dissipated. But I mean, it was there. It was so powerful. But clearly, that's not really related to like normal life. You know, it was like this. It was like a presentation of the reality of Kundalini, and it was like it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. Um, Whereas now, like what's been happening, and this has been happening, and it tends to sort of pick up at nighttime. Like I don't really feel it right now. Right now, I feel kind of normal, but like after like around dusk, I can start feeling the energy picking up, and then it's just like there's like an unfoldment. It's like an unfoldment, and it's like it's hard to No, I'm sorry. Something is Gary here just put a message up, so I'm just reading this. Yeah, I'm going to get to the Sri Chakra in a little bit. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Uh, yeah. So anyway, what's happening now is, and I'm pretty sure it's a result of these transmissions. Um, I think it's a couple of things. One thing is the transmissions, and it's the other thing that I've been working on this sort of inner child dialogue and trying to resolve the tension between the ego and the inner child, right? Because that tension, from what I've read, creates blindness to the true reality as presented by the Advaita masters, right? So I've been working on that a little bit. And also, my meditations a lot of times are focused in the physical world these days rather than in the imaginative plane, which is it's amazing doing that because, of course, the so-called physical world is really it's really not that physical, right? What it really is it's and I guess you can see here that I've got half the screen devoted to my YouTube here, right? And there's a reason for that. I'm actually going to go over there in a second, and maybe I'll go there now. Let me just see if I can do that right now. That's not the one. This is the one. Okay. So, well, it's funny because like I'm a big fan of the Bhagavad Gita. Um, I see it as a divine book. I don't see it that way. It was kind of like revealed that way to me during some of the Kundalini visions. Um, and I'm actually just moving this so I can see the chat at the same time. Okay. Um, but what I'm talking about is I'm talking about the flowering of consciousness. Oh yeah, and this phrase, the flowering of consciousness, which is the title of this video. I didn't come up with that phrase. Like what happened is the other night, it was about 2 nights ago. Yeah, it was when I was having the experiences with the Sri Chakra. I couldn't sleep that night. I was up until 5 a.m. and I decided I was going to meditate. And holy wow, holy shit, that was a crazy night. But the one of the phrases which came through to me was the flowering of consciousness, and that was what's happening to me. And it's funny because when I've read the Buddhist stuff previously about the rising and passing away, these they kind of seem to diminish the importance of Kundalini, and that kind of annoyed me. Like, dude, I was like, how can you diminish the importance of Kundalini? It's like the biggest thing on the planet, right? On the planet, whatever that is, right? Um, but the flowering of consciousness, which seems to me like it's the first step into true enlightenment, I guess, is distinct. And the reason it's distinct is because of it's because of some of these things I'm going to show you here. And hopefully I can explain it. I'm not the best at explaining stuff sometimes. So I've quoted a couple of things here because these are things like about. Everybody talks about these things. If you've seen the Matrix, people talks about this stuff. But what's really funny about it is, you see the Matrix, and there's this new language to describe. There's a simulation. It's a crazy. Dude, this has all been discussed previously, right? You don't need modern science. It's already been described in perfect detail. So this is from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verse 29. Did I? The one who sees that all actions or deeds are done performed exclusively by Prakriti, our matrix and material nature, and thus sees that he is not the doer, that one sees. Now, what the hell does that mean? Well, there's some vocabulary there. Prakriti. What is Prakriti? Now, I'm just going to go through here because I've tried to open up Prakriti and Purusha. Here we go. So here is a nice little map of um, of the human. Now, there's a whole bunch of these available online. I've previously published stuff like this to the page. I published stuff like this to the community page here like 2 years ago, similar stuff. But it's funny because intellectual knowledge, real understanding, right? And then like things just become revealed to you and you're like, oh, I get it. Now, I've clearly understood most of this anyway, because like I commonly talk about Shakti and Shiva, right? I talk about how all the time I talk about how Shiva is attracted sexually, not really sexually, but that's how you might interpret it. Like it's like that kind of magnetic attraction to Shakti, and is immersed into Shakti, right? Now, in sort of other terms, Shiva might be called Purusha and Shakti might be called Prakriti, right? So this is, I guess I've been using the wrong phraseology, if you will, right? So Shiva is pure consciousness and Shakti is the, the Kundalini power to create everything, anything, at any level, deeper than we want to know. We don't want to know how deep that goes. Trust me. I mean, you start going deep in there and you're like, holy fuck, get me out of here. It's that deep. And some of it's great. I mean, it's cool at the right level, right? It's amazing. Now, where these two meet is called, it's commonly called Buddhi, but here they've got three names: Mahat, Buddhi, or cosmic intelligence. And from Buddhi, I'll call it Buddhi, that's what the phrase I'm more familiar with, emerges a hankara, which is ego, right? That's the ego. And, oops, what did I do there? I think I just opened up a new window. There we go. Ego. Um, anyway, so the idea here is that there is this, it's almost like a weave. It's like a woven, it's like a woven fabric of Purusha and Prakriti. And they're like, it's kind of like, and this is one of my terrible metaphors. It's kind of like if you take water and flour and let's say yeast. Okay, let's say flour and yeast, and then water's just the medium which allows those two things to combine, right? So it's kind of like if you combine those and then you add fire, you get you get a big piece of bread. And if you've got bread, it's pretty much impossible to extract the yeast and the flour and the water again, right? That's impossible to do. There's been some kind of chemical reaction where it's changed form, right? So even though hey, this was flour, this was yeast, this was water, now it's bread. It's had a category classification change. You can't go back. That's kind of what happens here at the Buddhi level, or let's say the Ahankara level. Now I'm gonna say the Buddhi level. That's already happened at the Buddhi level. And so what happens is there's like it's almost like a chemical reaction, which is which is so powerful. And see, this is why the ego can't detect it because it's not there. Even though it's combined, even though it's being created by those forces, it's no longer visible to consciousness, right? It's bread now. You can't see Prakriti or Purusha anymore. And on top of that, the Now, some of these ideas, I'm just going to be frank, some of these ideas I'm still coming to terms with, like everything I just spoke about, I'm really comfortable with all of that. I'm also really comfortable talking about almost all of this diagram here, except for one part which I'm going to discuss right now, and it's I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around a little bit, like, because a lot of like I've got my own understanding of this, but I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to wrap my head around the Hindu categorizations of what they are and how they relate to the way I understand it. And I'm talking about the gunas, and just the name gunas. I mean, what is that? Well, the gunas are the representations of the gunas are tamas, sattva, and manas. Oh, sorry, rajas. There's three gunas. What are the three gunas? Three gunas. Tamas, sattva, and rajas. That's what I was looking for. Tamas, sattva, and rajas. And see, these gunas are kind of like the representation of, they're sort of the primordial elemental forces, right? So I talk a lot about the elements on this channel, and so those three gunas are the primordial elemental forces. Now, what I think they're basically corresponding to is what is basically what Franz Bardon would call the electrical and magnetic fluids, right? So there's one which is like energetic, there's one which is more magnetic, and so I think that's what's good. I think that's what's actually being discussed with that terminology. But the main thing is those are the primordial forces which emerge as a sort of byproduct of the chemical reaction pushing consciousness into ahankara, and those forces create the outputs of consciousness, which, as we can see here, there's a whole bunch of them. Now there's some Hindu terminology here: Ananda Maya Kosha, Vijnana Maya Kosha, Mano Maya Kosha, Prana Maya Kosha, and Anamaya Kosha. And see, when you look at this stuff, it can be confusing, but I think it's useful to do it because it's useful to do it because from the context of like, dude, this has been known for thousands of years, right? So you can go out and do some LSD or some ayahuasca and think you've discovered like ego death. I mean, this has been discussed for thousands of years, and that's comforting. That's comforting. So, um, if we scroll down here, all this stuff basically gets described. So, what the koshas are, or those are sort of the layers, like the causal body, the bliss body, the wisdom body, the mental body, the etc. So that's like Ananda. Let me see, Anando. It's a big article. Okay, okay. Ananda is harmony, balance. Oh no, that's it's actually no, that was really dumb, guys. It actually goes backwards. Okay, okay. So Ananda is the bliss body. Vigna is I think it's the intellect. Okay, the mental body. Then there's the mind. Then there's the prana. So that's the astral body, right? So all these are emerging after this bread. I actually quite like that metaphor, the bread. After the bread has been created, emerges the three gunas, which output dimensional structure of the five sheaths in which consciousness, as we understand it, is placed with outputs and inputs, I guess you could call them. So the bottom line here, we've got the Jananendriyas, the Karmanendriyas, and the Bhutas. So the Bhutas is something I've talked about quite a bit, which is the elements in their sort of more sort of physical astral manifestation. The Karmanendriyas are these are like the physical senses, and these are like the sort of This is like the nouns of the physical senses, and these are like the verbs of the physical senses. And those are kind of like the inputs and outputs combined with the elements to create the conscious awareness that we enjoy, or which confuses us. Because not only can we not see the bread, most of us are not even aware that these sheaths of awareness exist around us, nor that they are created by the gunas. Now, the interesting thing about the gunas is that they are pretty much, you can't control them. So there are things you can do to like balance the elements and but it seems like what happens is the gunas, which represent, let me just get a good description rather than trying to like um remember. I've got a really bad memory here. So I kind of know. Yeah, okay. So the sattva is goodness, calmness, harmonious. Rajas is passion, activity, and movement. And tamas is inertia, ignorance, and laziness. Right? But of course, what they're really doing here is they're presenting the good side of these gunas. Right? So there's obviously positive and negative aspects of these things. Now, in like some of the classes I've done, I don't talk about the goodness. I basically do the whole interpretation just using a sort of elemental, because you can think about the all these things like goodness, calmness, and harmonious. You could relate to the elements, but the idea of dropping it into a sort of parent primordial origin is quite useful, I guess. But anyway, the main thing here is that, and I'm going to go over to my good friend Krishna for a second. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verse 29. The one who sees that all actions and deeds are done, performed exclusively by Prakriti, our matrix and material nature, and thus sees that he is not the doer, that's the one who sees. What he's saying here is, if you recognize that everything you do in this world, everything you think you do in this world is not you. Everything is done by Prakriti, and the structure which is projected out of Prakriti, out of this combination of Purusha and Prakriti, there is an explosion of breath. There's a breath explosion. There's like some kind of like interaction. They solidify into a form which is unrecognizable as their original format, and a matrix, a matrix in the sense that there's like a matrix of information here. There's five sheaths which have, it's almost like a database with various systems of tables inside it with other elements inside of it. That is the actual matrix. It's not some abstract concept, right? I mean, this is quite abstract, but it's not like it, this is what it is. Like in the simplest terms, that's what the matrix is. Oh, and the main point I'm trying to make here is that, and then, well, the main point that Krishna is trying to make here is that we have no control over our actions. None. It's all been predetermined. All of it. And that's what he's saying. He's saying the one who can see that the actions are done exclusively by Prakriti, and our matrix and material nature, he is the one who can see. You are not the doer, right? You are not the doer. So, in a way, what seems to be happening is that even though, like, our awareness, this is one of the big teachings of like the Advaita teachers like Ramana Maharshi, right? But the big teaching of those guys is that who is the I am? Who is the I am? Right? So there was a teaching by Ramana Maharshi, and he was saying to this guy, I'm being brave here, trying to recite Ramana Maharshi's teachings here, but he was saying to some guy like, well, who are you? And he's like, well, He's like, I'm a physician. He's like, well, tomorrow, if you lose your job, will you be a physician? He's like, no. He's like, then you're not a physician. Okay. And so there's this idea that that seems like a simple concept, but it's really important. What it means is that we identify with the outputs. We're identifying the I am with outputs down at the bottom of the matrix. But actually, you are Purusha, right? You are pure awareness. Actually, you're not Purusha either. What you are is your Param Purusha, right? This guy, Param Purushna, which could be known as Ein Sof if you're in the Kabbalistic circles, right? So that's who you really are. But you can't see it because you're too busy thinking you're down here, thinking that you're a physician or a musician or a pediatrician or whatever, right? Shin. Um, oh, Lord Krishna, one more time. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 27. Lord Krishna revealed, all actions take place in time by the interweaving of the gunas of nature. What that means is all actions don't happen because you're a go-getter and because you took enough Red Bull today. All actions take place because of the interweaving of the gunas of nature. That means what it means is what it says. All actions occur because of the gunas, right? Which are closely related to karma, right? So there are outputs of this energetic combination. But the man lost and selfish, thinks that he himself is the doer of the action. So because man can't see the full scope of what everything is, he thinks he's done these things. But in fact, all you're doing is playing out. Um, all you're doing really is you're observing the playing out of the gunas. That's what you're doing. And what Ramana Maharshi told that guy, the physician, the pediatrician, whatever it was, um, he said, because I think the pediatrician said to him, he's like, well, what am I? I don't have any free will. Is that? And he's like, listen, he's like, don't. He's like, you can't. He's like, your job is not to identify it. It's not to identify with what you're doing. It's get into the state of just observation. The big problem we have is we start identifying ourselves with the lower rungs of the matrix and thinking that's who I am, and it's not true. It's not true. I mean, in a way, this is kind of what that whole story of the prince and the pauper was about, right? It was like, I'm a pauper. No, you're actually a prince. You just don't see it yet, right? And that is what's going on here. There's been, and so the important thing is to not get, is to not attach. So, like for example, I just I just made a big breakfast of like French toast, anabolic French toast, semi-anabolic French toast, which is like it's like a high protein French toast, and it was semi-anabolic. It had quite a lot of protein in it, but I think it was probably pretty high in calories, and so I'm feeling a little guilty about that. Like, man, I'm really gonna have to do a lot of exercise today to work that off or whatever. But no, what I need to do is I just need to like observe. See, I'm even at that like simple level. At the simple level, I'm attaching to this, right? No, the flowering of consciousness, which I've experienced in the last couple of weeks, has been. What's really astonishing about it is that it's kind of like, if I can move back to my wonderful thing here, it's kind of like when you look at something, it gets unraveled up to the top. So you look at something and you can just see it like deconstruct, and it's not a visual; it's an awareness. You know, like you're doing like an ayahuasca ceremony, and you see you see something like a mandala. Now, if you see a mandala on Google, it doesn't mean anything to you. It just looks like a nice image. But if you see an ayahuasca, it's got conscious significance, right? So that's kind of what's happening. Is this flowering of consciousness? Is like when you look at something, it's almost like what I felt about it was like, wow. I was like, this is what Kundalini's true role is. Kundalini's true role is to disintegrate. Yeah, I mean, to disintegrate the bread structure. So this matrix structure which has come out and has been solidified as far as we can tell into physical reality. Kundalini's actual role is to disintegrate it. I guess it produces it and it disintegrates it too. And so that's I mean, I haven't even seen this film, but there's what's that film, The Avengers, where everybody like turns into particle dust and they just and they all disintegrate. There's an element of that to it, where you look at something, but the disintegration isn't visual at this stage. It's conscious disintegration, and that's why it's like it's really cool. Like the other night, I was sitting there just watching it, and my mind would move to a new thought, and I wasn't even meditating. I was just lying in bed, and my mind would go somewhere, and then I could just disintegrate. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. But obviously, where people get scared about this is it's cool when it starts because it's just like this sort of cool effect. In the grand scope of the Matrix, there's a little bit of disintegration, but then all of a sudden everything disintegrates. Okay, so that's where it gets scary, right? Because then there's nothing to identify with. There's no, and so you've got to identify with the void, which might be like up here somewhere, up in the top rungs of above Buddhi, right? So I mean that's probably the purpose of meditation is really to become more comfortable with abiding in these formless states. Because when this shit completely disintegrates, which it hasn't completely disintegrated yet, but yeah, I mean, people have asked me, like, Scott, are you enlightened? And I say, no, I'm not. But I'll tell you something. If it continues what started happening 2 weeks ago, that's enlightenment. That's what it is. I know that's what it is. Now maybe it won't go any further. I mean, if it doesn't go any further, that's cool. I've got a vibe. Like but my understanding of this stuff is it doesn't stop, it just keeps going, right? Um so yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Again, the funny thing about this is like the Bhagavad Gita describes all this stuff like in really pretty extreme detail. Like it's not like a big secret, right? We're just not educated, right? And I find it odd that I'm here reading scriptures, reading the freaking Bhagavad Gita like a zealot, right? There's something amusing about that, right? I mean, here I am preaching. I'm preaching from the Bhagavad Gita. What is going on? And it's not just the Bhagavad Gita. There's when you start looking into this stuff, it's in all the Hindu scriptures, right? It's widely discussed, sometimes metaphorically. But I mean, look, I mean, Krishna is not that metaphorical, right? He pretty much is saying it. He uses the word matrix for Christ's sake. Matrix. Amazing, right? So that's pretty surprising. Um, yeah, I think I'm done talking about this. The other thing I was going to talk about briefly, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm going to change subjects. I'm trying to think of a way of how I can communicate this flowering of conscious to you, like the disintegration, that sense. Like I guess that Avengers thing where everything just disintegrates. It feels like that, but cooler. because it's just like the because I guess the Avengers scene, just a visual, but much like an ayahuasca ceremony, when you see these structures disintegrate, it's consciousness. So it has like there's understanding as it happens. It's so cool. The other thing is like, when was that? Like I was the flowering of consciousness idea. That was like today's Tuesday. That was probably Friday or Saturday night. Friday night. Yeah, I couldn't sleep on Friday, so it was like that was probably the flowering of consciousness was about 10 p.m. Friday night, I think. But then I couldn't sleep, so I was just lying there like meditating all night until like 5 or 6 a.m. Um, hugely visual meditations. Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, like bordering on like hardcore hallucinations, like where just imagery becomes real outside of yourself, and unbelievable. But again, it's conscious, right? And what's funny about it is it's easy. Like I think with that kind of level of visual, it's easy to drift off into psychosis. I think the trick to this is not identifying, right? So this is the important thing is like at these levels of consciousness, with the if you start identifying the I at the lower stages of consciousness which are disintegrating, you're going to have some serious issues, right? You're going to have some serious problems. So you can't do that. You gotta not identify. You're not the doer. So yeah. So when I was having some of these like hallucinational meditations, and part of these were coming through because I was doing work on the inner child. I was actually just moving energy, I was trying to span the gap between the ego and the inner child, which is basically, now the inner child, go back to my little map here, you can see that the inner child is not marked out here on the Hindu map, right? It's not marked. But what I would say the inner child is, like I said, it's part of the pain body. It's what Eckhart Tolle would call the pain body. But I think what it is can I do this here? Hold on a second. How am I going to do this? I know. Hold on a second. I'm going to do a little image here, maybe. Can I copy this? I can. Like, and let me see if I can. I'm going to see if I can share this. Come on, guys. That's completely useless Windows. Um, Hold on a second. I kind of just want to do this, so let me see if it will work. Oh, the picture didn't show up. Let me try again. Yeah, so my point is here is that the losing the yeah, Windows doesn't work. I guess it's because I'm grabbing the screen or something. Windows doesn't want to display the image because I'm grabbing the screen, I guess, plus I'm grabbing the video. So maybe there's something like that going on. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, all I was going to do was I was going to draw a little picture inside this triangle, right? So this triangle represents actually one, two, three, four, five different sheaths, like the astral, mental, causal, bliss, all those different bodies, right? And so my understanding of the inner child is it's like an imprint of all those sheaths, or maybe a good way it's like, let's just call it distortion. It's distortion in all those sheaths, right? I think it's probably more complex than that, but it's like a distortion in those sheaths. And so what I was doing, I was meditating between those, just trying to understand the relationship between the ego and the inner child. So somebody I was speaking to was saying that they called the ego was almost like evil. It was almost evil. It was almost like out to get the inner child. And so that's an interesting thing. And so I was trying to meditate into that. And I think for some people that may be true. I think it may be true for me. I think the ego has has a vibe of yeah, there's some kind of weird relationship between the ego and the inner child, which is almost unpleasant, right? And the distortions which are created from that are where various problems occur, right? Various problems occur. So anyway, as I was investigating this in my meditation the other night, I was started like let's just call it hallucinating. I would, or it's an evocation. You start evoking, but you can evoke spirits, you can evoke deities, and you can evoke archetypes and various things. And there's different levels of this. Sometimes, like for example, a couple of months ago, I evoked Ganesha, and I didn't actually see Ganesha, but there was like jewels. There was jewels and mandalas, um, like around me, and the consciousness was Ganesha. So I knew I was in the presence of Ganesha, even though it wasn't a full physical evocation. Um, but yeah, the other night, so I had this evocation of some of the contents of the inner child, and it was unpleasant. It wasn't nice, um, and the ego structure with that. So these are things which are good to investigate in context of not identifying with them. I think what happens is if there's like an energetic attraction between the ego and the inner child, right? Because of some kind of trauma, right? It creates a sort of magnetic cords between those two states of consciousness. And that magnetism makes it impossible to, the magnetism makes you identify with this issue, right? So you can't unidentify because you've got energetic attachments to states, these states of consciousness. That's why it's worth investigating them to dissolve the states of consciousness, and then you can actually start living in the real world, right? Speaking of which, yeah. So anyway, as I was doing this, moving through the inner child, there's a lot of like I'm saying, there's a lot of like unpleasant stuff there, and the problem is when you're in very deep states of meditation. The problem is when you're in a deep state of meditation, um, and some idea flows into your mind. Even colors can trigger it. But if you've got like an idea or a color, what happens is those sort of ideas or colors can invoke higher level spirits from that world, right? So you often find this if you think about the color black, you can evoke demons, right? Red can sometimes evoke demons easily. Um, but it depends how you work with the colors. It depends on the imagery. It depends on how you identify. Like if you identify, like I think like a lot of black magic, what happens with black magic is they may have a strong connection to consciousness, but they really identify with the contents of this space of consciousness. And in that context, it's so easy to evoke demons. It's really really easy to evoke demons. It's not yeah, and so it's really easy. Um, but it's dangerous. Clearly, it's dangerous to do it. So I definitely don't recommend people try doing it. For me, it always happens like by accident. I'm like fuck, like, and usually what happens is like because the problem is that the contents of your consciousness, it can start with a color, it can start with an idea, but oftentimes those magnetic attractions, those cords of attractions, they can lead into sort of ideas which are not based on the highest principles of morality, let's say, right? And yeah, so you're not gonna discover anything wonderful in those zones, right? Those zones are the dominion of energetic structures which reveal themselves to the third eye as demonic. Whether they are or not, that's how they get revealed. That's how we understand them. I'm just noticing there's some comments here. Hold on a second. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Listen, yeah. What I think is yeah, true life stories here is saying don't let demons scare you. It's just you, you know. Yeah. Mixed feelings about that. Um, there is an aspect of that where it's just you. I mean, for example, clearly in this map of consciousness we've got here, everything is emerging from just you. If we accept that you is Param Purushna, right? Sure, totally acceptable. But in the context of the ego, from here down, yeah, there's it's bigger than just being you. It's not you in context of anything which humanity understands you as. But no, I agree with you. Otherwise, you know. Um, anyway, I'm actually I'm way beyond generally getting scared of demons these days. You know, so I mean, in the past I got really scared by them. Some of them are terrifying, um, but generally, if you know how to modulate and control the focus of your consciousness, then you have no problems, right? Um, the demons can come out, and then you just modulate your consciousness and move into a state of observation, and it's cool. However, don't take my word for this. The only way to really discover this stuff is to do it yourself and to find out what techniques work for you, right? So like you can pretend that it's all just me, or like they're emanations. Actually, my point here is that they're actually emanations coming out of the distortion of the energetic distortion. But let's not kid ourselves. These are cosmic energies, right? These are cosmic energies at the highest order. So yeah. Um, what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So you got to sort of figure out how you deal with this stuff yourself. So like for example, it's a common thing in horror films. If vampires come out, you might grab a cross, a crucifix, hold up the crucifix, right? Um, and see what happens. Now I know the first time I saw a demon 5 or 6 years ago, I got crucifix and it didn't help at all. It did not help, right? The demon advanced. And this is the thing. I mean, it's one thing to see a demon in your mind's eye. It's another thing to see it in the real world, right? So all I'm saying is, like, when you see a demon in the real world, um, yeah, it's disconcerting. It's disconcerting. Anyway, when I was moving into this area the other night, I wasn't really. I was getting like sort of minor evocations, and there was like some color and some subject matters in the space between the ego and the inner child, which were questionable. And because my sense of focus was so high, started getting some evocations of negative spirits and stuff coming out, But I'm moving into like non-identification and I'm just watching. I'm just watching. And this is how you protect yourself from madness. Because if you start identifying, you're fucked. If you start identifying yourself in any way with what you see, um, yeah, I'm going to say the short the short coastal road to the mental hospital, right? But if you stay in non-identification, you're cool. Anyway, as I was sitting watching this stuff, I was thinking, because there was like some demonic stuff, and I was because you like to experiment, And so I was thinking, because like I'm trying to like I've been thinking about like symbolic ways of communication, right? And so I actually tried this. I thought I'll just visualize a cross and push this cross into this visual hallucination which I'm having. I'm going to push this cross in. So I did it. Absolutely nothing happened, you know. I mean, there was a bit of energy. There's a bit of energy from it, but there's just not much. I mean, part of this is this doesn't mean the cross is not a useful or a useful mnemonic structure. Um, it probably just means that I'm not really into it that much, you know. So a lot of it comes down to your own energy. Um, and then out of nowhere, as I was thinking about it, right behind the cross came up this sort of blurry image, which was the Sri Chakra. The Sri Chakra, which we let me switch over here, which is this thing here. I wonder if you can hear this. Probably not. So this is the Sri Chakra, and
Om Aim
what it represents, there's a bunch of ways of representing the Sri Chakra or thinking about it. So basically, like, actually, I don't know if you can hear this. Hey, can you guys hear this? Somebody tell me if you can hear it. What they're doing right now is they're reciting the names of the deities who occupy each point in the outside square in the red part. And then in a second, they're going to move inside. So this outside part represents like the root chakra. Then they're going to move inside, which is going to represent the like Sthana. Or if we keep it in terms of what we've been talking already, it's moving up here. It's starting down here, then it's moving up to the Pranamaya Kosha, right? Which will be about here. Okay, you can see the red lines here, which are moving circles, which are moving. Okay, and now they're going to learn the petals of the chakra, right? So this is one way of thinking about it. It's thinking about it in these terms of it's a mnemonic designed to guide us through the chakras. And then in each angle here too, each one is related to a specific deity. And so the whole point of this is basically a sort of raising of the vibration of consciousness. So as you move from the outside to the inside, you're moving closer in and in. So you're actually, what you're doing is you're moving higher and higher up to Parampurushna by doing this, right? It's awesome. And, you know, a lot of people use this and not many people really know what it is, you know, but that's generally how it's understood. And so like in Sri Vidya Tantra, they do a practice, which I started learning at one point, but you sort of, it's kind of like doing the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But what you do is you, la, la, da, la, da, 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 you touch your body at each point as you recite the names of the deities and you install the deity into your body. And so you make a relationship between the yantra, which this is, and the human body. Really cool. Anyway, there are things which are really cool. There are things which are really cool, which have an intellectual structure, like the story I just told you, and they're sort of like a framework for understanding consciousness. And then you've got like real experiences where things are revealed to you. So that's what happened. So I was, what happened is, as I was contemplating the lack of efficacy of the cross, this Sri Chakra came up behind the cross. Everything vanished. All negativity vanished. All demons, all imagery immediately vanished. And this thing just started glowing. It started glowing in front of my eyes. And then it was almost like what are those things called? Those images called where the you know those things when you're a kid you get like sometimes they've got them on money. Let me see. Chilean money here. Yeah, but sometimes there'll be like an image, and when you turn it, when you turn the image, it's almost like a 3D effect on it, right? So you can sort of turn it, and there's like different angles. So this thing started glowing, and as it slightly was, it you know it had like perspective to it, and I'm looking at it like what's going on, and then as I look, it's it's another example. Have you ever seen those videos? They're quite popular in memes these days, where they'll have like a whole bunch of garbage hanging. There'll be a whole bunch of garbage hanging, and then they move the camera around the front, and it's like what they've done is they've arranged the garbage into an image of like a Claude Monet painting, right? Then they move back out, and it looks like garbage. Then they move back in. So that's kind of what's going on here with the Sri Chakra. Like when we're looking at it from this two-dimensional perspective, we can't see. But when you see it from consciousness, and when you're able to like move around it, there's a whole different. This is actually just a 2D projection of a structure, which is way more profound than this, and um, and that is and it's a technology. I'm just no, I'm not. You can take this all with a. I'm not telling you this is all true. I'm telling you this is what I saw, and from I'm taking it to be true myself. I mean, to me, it was 100% true. But I mean, you can decide. I'm not trying to teach. I'm not. Well, I guess I'm not trying to convince anybody. But it is interesting, and I think it's true. Um, so yeah, so it's the Sri Chakra is a stargate. It's a stargate of consciousness. And the people who designed the Sri Chakra designed consciousness itself. Now, I don't know how that happens. I think there's a lot of things which go on in consciousness which are beyond our understanding. So, True Life Stories here saying in the comments, like, don't let demons scare you because it's just you. Okay. Could say the same thing about this, don't worry about the designers of consciousness, it's just you. But it's not you in any kind of like manageable, understandable way you might think of who you are. It's just not, right? So the way the designers of consciousness appear is they are. Um, I actually didn't see them. I've seen them before during very deep ceremonies, and there's like an element of sci-fi to them. It's like advanced technology. See, I hesitate to use the word technology because it's technology which is so advanced that yeah, it's just more advanced than we can conceive of, right? And but directly it's the this is like the badge. Like if you were like in Star Trek and you had this emblazoned on your shirt in gold, that would be like your passcode into anything. It'd be safe passage into any zone of consciousness. I actually think like this is such a powerful imagery that I think if it's true what they say about the bardos, like going through bardos when you die, I think this is like a get out of jail free pass. That's what my view of it is. I think uh, I think at the very lowest level, associating yourself with this image in any way will make your life better. Now I've heard people say that before, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. But like I now know it to be true, at least for me. Any association with this image puts you in the vibration of the designers of consciousness. No, here's an interesting thing to contemplate is recently I was pontificating once again on the importance of non-identification, right? Whereas here I'm saying identify with this image, right? Isn't that a conflict, Scott? But I think the way to think about that is it's almost like the Tibetan Buddhists who do deity identification. Like a lot of people don't like to think about deity, but I mean that's mainly done as a pathway to pure consciousness, right? And like this is like a pathway to pure consciousness and understanding consciousness at a high level. So in a way, um, yeah, hard to say. It's hard to get past that. I mean, non-identification, like all the big masters like Nisargadatta and Maharshi always talk about non-identification is the way to go. And here I am talking about identification with this image, you know. So I mean, maybe I'm making an error there, but in terms of like human life, right? I'm not talking about pure consciousness or enlightenment or anything here, right? So, in terms of human life, I'm convinced. I haven't tried it yet. We'll see, but like this is this the designers of consciousness are beyond divinity, right? It's like they're beyond divinity, which seems ridiculous, but it seems like it's like some other thing. And being associated with this at any level is probably going to be good in your life, is what I think. Yeah. Um, I wish I could tell you more, but I don't want to sound like a complete lunatic. You know, there are some visuals as you move into this. The sensation, like it's almost like that effect, that sort of like dimensional effect. It's sort of trans-dimensional, and as you move around it, it's almost like it's what the hell is that? It's almost like a structure of it's almost like a spaceship or something. It's almost like the structure of a spaceship. It's not, but it's like it's got this, and it's almost like a Z. It's got this like sweeping light effect, which I don't know how it all gets put together. I'm just trying to describe sort of basic emanations I got out of this. It's like a big sort of Z light effect with this this sort of the other dimensions of this object which we can't see, right? And then as you focus on it, you just get blasted into other dimensions. That's why I'm saying it's like a Stargate because it literally takes you into other places, anywhere. Um, yeah, but I mean, what can you do? I mean, it's like I think I'm running out of gas here. I just I think I'm gonna be experimenting a little bit with the Sri Chakra um, and see what happens here, and maybe it'll be an interesting experiment. Yeah. But I clearly seem to. I think I've run out of steam. Yeah. So I think I'll end the video. Thanks for joining me. Um, and non-identification. I think the first part of the video here, talking about non-identification, was quite good. I did want to talk a little bit about the Sri Chakra and the emanations and stuff, and that was pretty interesting. So, but until the next time, you guys, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you later. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say just focus on the non-doer, the gunas. I mean, that's the big thing here is that that everything you do is not actually you. It's actually output from a higher order of consciousness. Okay, I'm out of here, guys. Take care.